Two Poor Bastards contains explicit content and drunken ramblings. Listener discretion is advised. To Two Poor Bastards, where two friends get drunk, talk whiskey, and their favorite pop culture obsessions. This is Eric.
And this is Kyle.
And you are on episode 2 of Two Poor Bastards. So we're going to get hopping in right into the whiskey of the week. I'm excited about this. When I saw you unfurling it, I got happy. So give me your little piece on it.
All right. So for this week, I kind of dipped into my irreplaceable whiskey stash.
Yeah.
It's not something that's too impossible to get, but it only comes out once a year, and it is Michters 10-year single barrel. Now, with this stuff here, being a single barrel, I might have touched on this last week. Literally, what's in the bottle comes from a single barrel. It's not added to any other barrels like most either small batch or just regular run whiskeys are, where they just dump a ton of barrels, mix them together, put them to the proof they want, and bottle them up. This is taken from one barrel, brought down to proof, bottled, and there it goes. Now, with a single barrel whiskey, you run the chance of getting a really terrible barrel. But on the other hand, you also could get the amazing experience of getting like a super cherry barrel, like one that is better than all the other ones, one that's just like head and shoulders above everything else. But typically people who work at distilleries, they're going around, they're sampling barrels, and those ones really get pulled before anything else for some other special thing.
Gotcha.
Now, with this guy being from Michters, Michters started out as a non-distiller producer. So
you touched on that last week.
Yep. So what this means is they have a company, they bottle the stuff, they sell it, but they did not distill it. So this was sourced from somewhere else. We don't know where this whiskey came from. We don't know what the mash bill is. All we know is that this guy is 10 years old. Now, there had been rumors that past Michters 10-year releases had actually been older than what the age statement is. Why they chose to label that as a 10-year, if they truly did do that, is kind of odd. If it were a blend of different whiskeys, I could see that being the case, where the youngest one has to be the age statement. They do that because if you were doing a blend and you had like a 40-year-old whiskey in it, and you just put an eyedropper of it in there, you couldn't claim that that's what it was. With this, I had also in the past heard rumors that, it's not that great. Some of it's just, it's overpriced for what it is. It's not that great. I took the chance on it going in with that, but then again, it's single barrel, so somebody could have had just a really terrible, terrible barrel, which I've had before with other things, and just, blew that out of proportion. But enough talk about that. We can get into actually sampling it here.
I am waiting for the sample.
Yes, I have been waiting to.
Cheers, motherfucker.
Cheers. So, smelling it, it's a real light aroma. It's not too heavy, a little on the thin side. I smell almost like candy. Hard candy, not like chocolate or something like that, but a hard candy. I don't know what it is, but just smelling it, I would say I get a hint of maybe Brown-Forman as the distillery.
Okay, I was to say, what is that?
You would have to have kind of almost. Actually, I'm getting like a hint of iodine to it too.
Okay, I can pick that up.
And if you have something like Old Forester, either the 1920 or their birthday bourbon, it's almost a little bit of that. Maybe kind of a little bit of nuttiness to it as well. But not in the bad way, a good way.
Yeah.
Remind me to talk about nuttiness later after we taste it, so I can go off on a tangent on that. But
all
right, screw it. We're gonna taste it because I don't want to smell
ready.
anymore.
Listen, I'm ready. Let's go.
I'm just reminded of the first time I opened this bottle and I took a sip. I was like, damn, this is good whiskey. Going
full circle.
Going full circle on my list after tasting it and knowing a lot of stuff. I just really appreciated it. And I was like, wow, this is good. This is the kind of stuff that I could blast all day, every day, if it were available. Now, tasting it, I don't get the same thing that I did when I smell it. I don't get that Old Forester.
So let me ask you this. So what I've noticed a lot of times when there's a big difference between what you smell in a whiskey and then what you actually end up tasting. So do you know the process of that or what's going on?
I don't know. I was just going to say it could also go the other way too. Like, I've smelled something in it and I definitely have tasted it as well. And yes, some cases it goes real sideways where what you smell is definitely not what you taste. Big example of that was this latest year's Pappy Van Winkle line. Like the 15-year, not both, but all three, the 12, the 15, and the 20 year, I thought were terrible. I thought they were awful. They smelled great, but as soon as it came to tasting it and the finish on them, garbage, I thought. The 10 year was by far the best, and the 23-year-old wasn't terrible. It was interesting, but it wasn't all that great.
And you've touched on in the previous episode that whiskeys are not necessarily meant to be aged for a very long time. You said about 9-10 years is the sweet spot.
Yeah, there's definitely sweet spots, but I mean, there's always exceptions to the rule, and there's other things that can be done. Whatever you get. Okay, so when I'm tasting this, what I get, it's just about 95 proof. It's 94 point. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, 94.4 proof. So 72. I'm sorry. I just had a moment there. 47.2% alcohol. So it's a little bit higher than the normal one, but it definitely doesn't have that kind of bite.
I was just going to say, for being the proof that it is, it finishes well. Like, I like the finish. Like, it sits well afterwards. And it hits me a little bit in the chest, like, afterwards. But
not in the mouth?
But it doesn't hit me in the mouth.
it goes to the chest.
It goes right to the back of the throat.
It's the mouth feel is kind of on the medium side. Now, what I really look for in a whiskey is a good mouth feel, really oily. Like that. Like almost like not quite to the point where you are, drinking honey, that kind of thing, where you feel it coating the inside of your mouth, but like you can get the idea of how that would feel. So something similar to that is.
What is the oily aspect of whiskey?
I wouldn't say it's oily. That's the thing that you would describe how it feels.
Well, yeah, because drinking this, what I feel is I'm going to use completely layman off terms, but it's like you hacked a good loogie and you've got that after finish of spitting. It's that little, there's just a little bit of something there. It's viscous. Maybe.
Yes, very viscous feeling. Thank you,
and maybe,
layperson, for bringing in the proper term that we should be using.
I mean, maybe, and someone probably knows better, but maybe it's the fact of how it's interacting with our mouths and we're producing, saliva in a particular way. I don't know.
I'm sure there's some crazy science behind it.
But I will tell you that, yes, there is a oily aspect to this, and it finishes well. And
it does have a nice long finish, which is also something you really want in a good whiskey.
I love good long finishes. I wish I could have them all the time.
I do too. Just have whiskey all the time and then also have long finishes. So tasting it, going back to the candy thing, I almost get like Werther's Original.
Yeah.
A very toffee taste out of it.
Well, I would say imagine not tasting the Werther's at all and just having the aftertaste of Werther's.
That works too, yeah.
Yeah, like you just got done eating the Werther's, and what your mouth feels like afterwards is what this finishes off like.
And then going back off of what I got from the nose on it earlier is a little bit of nuttiness. Not a lot, but just a hint of it. Yeah. Not anything that would put me off. Because some of that does, like the earthy, nutty stuff, I'm not a huge fan of, which is a lot of Heaven Hill stuff, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I just wish we knew where this came from. You know, there is a trick to at least find out where a bottled whiskey comes from, because on the bottle it'll say where they have to disclose where it was distilled. And on here, it actually doesn't say.
Well, holy shit.
It just says bottled by Michters Distillery, Louisville, Kentucky.
Let me ask, I want to ask a question about maybe geography and history a little bit. So is bourbon called bourbon because it's from Bourbon, Kentucky?
No, actually it can be from other places.
But is that like the originator of...
I would say if you're really going to call it that, it should be from there. Like, Champagne should be from the Champagne region.
Tequila is from the Tequila province of Mexico, and it can't be called... You can make that product, but you can't call it tequila.
What is it, mezcal or something like that from other places? I know nothing about liquor that isn't brown.
Well, you can get brown tequila. It's just as varied as whiskeys.
Yes, the aged stuff. Right. Thanks for the reminder. So what I was trying to tell Eric was, like, sometimes if you look, I guess it's going to be sometimes now, if you look at the back of a bottle and you're not sure where something comes from, it usually discloses where it's distilled. Whether it's from Indiana, if it's from MGP, if it's from Canada, if it's something else like Whistle Pig. All their starting out stock was sourced from Canada. But this, I don't know. But the way that it tastes, though, I would have to say that it came from one of the Kentucky distilleries. It wouldn't. I doubt it. I highly doubt it would be from anywhere else for any of their product.
I will say, I enjoy it. That's something that I could drink every day. Now, is this a spendy little girl?
This is pretty expensive. This is another one that I was fortunate enough to pick up at Total Wine. They had one bottle sitting at like their tasting desk hidden, and I walked by 3 times, and I just said, fuck it. I'm taking this and bringing it right up front, and I'm buying it. I don't know if they had it set aside for some reason or what, but I was just like, I debated enough. I'm just going to go for it. So it was $95.
Okay, yeah.
And I also saw it for sale at one of the other liquor stores that I go to, usually that I do my tastings at. Mm-hmm. They were selling it for $140.
Holy shit! So you kind of got a deal.
Kind of, but I'm sure that was more like the manufacturer's suggested price, and this other place that I go to tastings has been known to bump prices quite a bit on something.
Gouge.
Like,
I gotcha.
Going back to Pappy again, the 23-year-old is supposed to be like the manufacturer's suggested price, right around, I believe it's $250, $260. They sell it for $400 when they do their lotteries for it.
That is idiotic. That's some bullshit.
Yeah, but people will gladly pay that. Because something that I haven't gotten into that really fires me up is the bourbon secondary market, where it's the fucking Wild West and shit goes crazy. So typically we can start with this. On the secondary market, Michters 10-year, you can typically pick up for about $150, sometimes shipped. So that's not much worse than what that liquor store was charging with their bumped up price.
So they're just going straight to secondary market prices then.
Pretty much.
They're just like...
But something like 23-year-old Pappy, depending on the year, that can command up to $2,000. Like this latest year, 2017, was not that great, but you can still get like $1,600 for that, no problem.
Holy shit.
And people pay that. And there's stuff that's way more expensive. So like going off the Michter stuff here, unlike you, I know you're a fan of their bourbons.
Mm-hmm.
I have never had any of their bourbons that weren't their limited edition ones. So I've had the 10-year, I've had the 20-year, and I've had the 25-year.
Really?
Yeah. And they were good. I had those back in 2015 at a tasting. Sadly, I wasn't able to get any. But those guys, the retail price is high. But on the secondary market, something like the 25-year, $3,600 to $4,000.
Yowza. And that's even if you get because we had a previous conversation that we're flyover territory for
good
whiskey.
I think the state got like a couple bottles, like 2 or 3 of those ones. They were, when I did the tasting, they weren't even available for sale. Like the one bottle they got, we tasted, and that was it. So there wasn't even one for sale after that in the lottery.
Where do you go for tasting? This is like, other than like for me walking into Total Wine and be like, there's someone there. Is there like an exclusive event? Do they put out like, hey, so and so liquor store is having a tasting?
Like if you get on email listings for some of the places around here, I don't know if I really want to name names because I don't want to be like, well, this place really bumps prices and that sucks, but I go there and I do the tastings and that's cool.
Well, let's just talk about, we won't talk about pricing. We'll just talking about where you go and kind of how it works. So you go, you get on an email list.
So usually you get on the email list, or for some douchier places, be in their like membership clubs and have to spend X amount of dollars to then be considered for that.
That's a private club. I got you. All right.
It's for the rich people. Here's the good stuff because they're spending the money. I am by no means a rich person, and I don't know. I had a very favorite liquor store that I used to go to, and I got friendly with the guy who orders the spirits there, and worked out a thing. And typically when people are giving advice on how do I get these good bottles, how can I get into that, it's like, be friendly with your local liquor store, talk to them, become friends, buy lots of stuff. So I did that, talked to this guy, bought lots of stuff, got on the email list, went to my first tasting for all this other fancy stuff, and then like after that it all went downhill because that guy didn't work there anymore. I don't know what the reasons were, but he wasn't working there anymore. I wasn't getting emails anymore. I had been removed from the list. I would call and ask like, hey, have the emails gone out for the tasting yet, because I'm sitting here waiting. And I had been told like a month after when they had the tasting that they still hadn't had it yet. So I got blatantly lied to. Went in and went to talk to, who was in charge, and it's like, then I find out that the people that I knew who were there before are all gone for some reason.
Oh, wow.
And was given this excuse that, we stopped doing that and deleted people from the email list because the same 40 people ended up going every time. I'm like, why did I get deleted? I just went to my first one, and, I'm starting out in all of this, and it was a mess.
So to clarify, to gain favor, there was no over-the-pants handies.
There might be, but I haven't gone down that path yet.
Okay,
maybe that's why.
Because I'm just saying, like, when we're talking like $3,500 to $5,000 a bottle, sometimes I feel.
This is purely secondary market, though.
Oh, okay, all right, good stuff.
Which, if you want the good stuff now, that's really the only place you can go to get it. I haven't seen a bottle of Blanton's on the shelf for over a year. I haven't seen a bottle of Weller Special Reserve on the shelf for a year here in Minnesota.
I feel very thankful that you had shared some of your Weller with me, because it was very good.
It is very good.
And again, that's another one that I would like to enjoy frequently. So can you order directly from distilleries or online buyers? So it's
No, but if you go to the gift shops in some of the distilleries, they've got really hot stuff there too.
Ooh.
Like Willette is a famous one.
Mm-hmm.
They used to be also a non-distiller producer, and they had all these sourced old barrels, and they would put out special ones and have them in their gift shop for sale. I'd say out of anyone who, bottles whiskey, whether they distill it themselves or not, the percentage of hyper expensive bottles, the majority of them come from Willette. I mean, even stuff that's not even really old will go for big bucks for some of the things they have. But they were putting out some old stuff, like 25-year-old bourbons and ryes. Some of them just go for mega bucks, thousands of dollars.
At the gift shop.
Not at the gift shop, secondary market. Sorry,
Secondary
at the
market.
gift shop they are kind of expensive. A few $100s for that kind of thing.
But what you're saying is, we should take a road trip, we should go to these places, and we should bring some money with us to buy some of these
Yes,
fine wares.
definitely.
Okay.
I'm getting off the rails with this conversation.
No, it's fine. I feel really enlightened. Like, I feel like I've actually learned something. Because here, I was going to use, like, my layman person words for the whiskey, and it's like vaguely sexual with a hint of melancholy with some other word. Like, I don't have any of the proper words and I don't understand, are the terms that you're using standard?
Some of them are standard. When I'm talking about how it tastes like or how it smells, I mean, there's no standard for that. It's whatever you're getting.
Because, like with wine, that's very clearly different. Like, it has there's very specific terms you use to describe wine. So I've heard. I don't know. I've heard other people talk about wine, and I'm more lost when people talk about wine, because I just don't drink wine at all.
I don't either, and I feel like that's like in a whole different dimension.
It is
that kind of stuff.
I feel like I'm not good enough to drink wine. Like, that's a whole other world of things, and I have no idea.
I have nothing to do with wine, but on the other hand, champagne is my jam. I do like champagne.
You know what? I'm not going to hate on that. I like champagne too. It's really tasty. All right, so does that finish up your segment, good sir?
It doesn't, because I wanted to go into
Keep going.
I wanted to go into actually Michters as a company. So, like I said before, they were a non-distiller producer, but originally Michters was produced at the old Baumberger's distillery in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So that happened from about...
It's a bomb.
Michters as an actual brand existed from about the 50s to the late 80s, early 90s. And then in 2004, the rights for the name were acquired by Chatham Imports. And they started both acquiring and selling juice that they got from other distilleries.
Okay.
Basically, sometimes I'll refer to whiskey as juice.
Okay.
When we're talking
Always
about
squeeze the juice as well.
The juice is loose.
Oh, no.
So they got most of their stuff from other people. What we're having right now, they got from someone else. Most likely, the regular bourbons that you've had, they got from someone else. I skipped by it earlier when I said I've only had their limited edition bourbons, but I've only had their standard edition rye whiskeys. And whoever they're getting the rye from, it's really good stuff. And I'm a big fan of that. I wish I could have got some of their limited edition ryes.
So is it, say, other famous distilleries, that company will say, we want to buy so many barrels from you, and then they just package it as their own? Is that how that works?
Exactly, yeah. The other company distills it, puts it in a barrel, gives it to them. They store it however they want, and sometimes the barrels have been pre-stored at these other places too. So
Gotcha.
They could have a barrel that they've had sitting around for, say, 10 years. And then someone talks to them and is like, hey, we want to buy X amount of this. Can we get this, that, or the other thing? They'll go, oh, okay, we've got this. You can buy it at X price. We've had it here for this long. Whatever. It gets sent out to them.
So my next question for you is, have you tried to pretend to start a whiskey company and buy a barrel?
No, because it's exceedingly expensive.
Okay.
A while back, famously on the internet, I think it was like a Costco or Sam's Club, had a barrel of just Jack Daniels for sale. Like, you can buy a whole barrel. And it was something like $7,000.
Holy shit.
And this is for really a shelf turd.
Yeah, shitty.
Like
shitty
the
whiskey.
worst.
The worst.
Yeah.
I get you.
Maybe not the worst. I've had some pretty bad
Okay,
stuff.
it's not the worst, but it's
I
it's
would
bottom.
never drink it.
Yeah.
Is basically what I would say. Not even mixed. I wouldn't drink Jack Daniels.
No, if you went to a bar, or you went to a restaurant, and you were getting a mixed drink, you would not. And yes, we do drink mixed drinks, and you and I have a common mixed drink we like, which is an old fashioned. Which, you know.
Above that, though, I would prefer a Manhattan, though. But I do like a good old fashioned.
There you are. Yep.
And a good old fashioned.
A good old fashioned handy jammer. All right. So that's very interesting, because I had no, when you talked about Michters being, they basically source their product, it seems really interesting to me, because, distillers typically are very proud of their product because you put very specific things into it. So you have your specific way that you formulate your whiskeys and how you store it and how you age it. So it's interesting that distilleries would sell that product,
right?
That
yeah.
possibly would be, very distinct to them, and just be like, yeah, you can label it as whatever the fuck you want. And so, I guess that makes sense, because Trader Joe's and Costco have their own branded liquors, and I would imagine they just, as you're saying, they just buy it from a distillery.
Exactly. They
slap
buy it
their
from
label
someone
on
else.
it, and then all is good. It's just really weird to me, because I guess it happens a lot more in reality, but like typically what we are used to is a company that's well known will create a subpar or entry level product under a particular brand that is, not theirs, but this other company makes it. You know what I mean? And it's typically not like the best, top of the line thing. Mm-hmm. And what you're saying was interesting with whiskeys is you're saying like it could be a pre-aged, really good whiskey, or whatever alcohol it is, and they could just buy it and slap their own label on it and say, hey, this is our. So is there an issue with inconsistencies then with a company like Michters?
The chance there always could be. Like I said with the single barrel thing, you could get one that really fucking sucks.
Okay.
Or get one that's really good. But basically now, unless you're just buying the product right as it gets distilled and barreled, you aren't getting shit anymore, because no distillery is going to sell anything that's been aged at all because the demand is so high. And either that or they just don't have anything to offer. So that's pretty much going to be going away. And then going off that, getting back to Michters' history here, they actually started distilling their own stuff in 2015. So soon they will actually, now they are a producing distillery. They are going to be offering their own stuff. Now, there's some drama behind the Michters name. So, as I said earlier, it was a company that used to exist went away. Name was reacquired. So, there is a man, his name is Dick Stoll, used to be the master distiller there in Pennsylvania at that Bomberger's distillery, who was actually in charge of doing it. Now, he came back in and started producing stuff with his business partner, Eric Wolf. Now, he had said, if I remember correctly here, he was using, like, on their label that he used to be the master distiller for that, and then the people who owned the Michters name now came in and were saying, like, you can't use that name, you can't say you had anything to do with it, and we're going to sue you.
Shit.
Basically, if you do. So Dick Stoll, when he started his own whiskey company up after working, at the Bomberger's distillery, doing Michters and that kind of thing, he started up his own company with his business partner, Eric Wolf, and they had mentioned that, he used to be master distiller at Bomberger's. People at Michters didn't like that, so they tried to say, you can't use Bomberger's, you can't say you work there, you can't do this, that, or the other thing.
It's really interesting because those are all factual things.
Yeah, they are, but they wanted to keep it from happening. So a lawsuit ensued, and basically they wanted to make Dick Stoll and Eric Wolf spend all their money and just, like, lose everything, so they couldn't open up their own distillery, because they were doing the same thing. They had sourced stuff. They were a non-producer distiller who were looking to open a distillery. So basically they wanted them to spend all their money so it couldn't happen.
Right.
And it happened.
Sad.
So they got it. So they took away the right for them to use the Bomberger's name in any capacity. And going off that, Bomberger's was in Pennsylvania. The people who acquired Michters then moved it to Kentucky, to be more of a Kentucky bourbon.
Gotcha.
Type
Yeah.
thing. In going with that, Michters uses a lot of crazy stuff in the description of this. Like, let me read you the label.
Please, regale me with your description.
So, Michters, like I said earlier, started around the 50s sometime, went away late 80s, early 90s. On the label on this bottle of Michters 10 year, in big red numbers, it says 1753.
Oh, okay.
And then in small letters that go around this oval-shaped label on the front, it says, distilled in small batches according to the Michters pre-Revolutionary War quality standards dating back to 1753. Now keep in mind, this was sourced from someone else. They didn't produce a drop of this juice.
Right, and they had, in reality, unless they worked with another distillery to distill it to their particular recipe, they had nothing to do with any of the content and any of the way that they actually produced it.
No, and they were saying that, George Washington gave Michters to his troops. And this
Holy shit.
Yeah, so it's just like all these wild things are being said.
Jesus gave this to the founding fathers of America when they were writing the Declaration of Independence. Like, this is the whiskey that started everything.
So and just going off that, there's a lot of, not so good things probably going on there. But when it comes down to it, when I drink this is fucking delicious, and I like it, and I want more.
So what you're saying is there's a lot of hyperbole when it comes to Michters, which God bless them for trying to, like, hype up a whole bunch of unverifiable bullshit. But it's still good. At the end of the day, what you're saying, is good stuff.
It's still good. And then there's some people out there like, oh, they fucked over people, I'm never drinking it again, and that kind of stuff. Which a while back, some drama happened with Bullet, as far as a brand in the Bullet family, the actual family. And I know there was a local liquor store that after they saw like the first big breaking news on that, how one of the people in the Bullitt family got really screwed over by the whole deal. They're like, we're going to reevaluate things and we're going to look into not carrying it anymore because of this. Well, they still carry it.
Not carrying Bullitt or Michters?
Bullitt.
Okay. So that's clearly a subject that we need to do later on.
Yeah, I'll get into that because, I mean, Bullitt Rye had been a big thing for me for a long time. Mm-hmm. So we'll get into it. We'll talk about that later.
Indeed.
But we've talked about whiskey long enough.
All right.
And it's time to get into the topic of the week.
Yeah, the topic of the week. So I've seen this movie many, 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 many times. And this is
I would say that I have to say this is the first time I've seen this movie. I had seen bits and pieces. I had thought I'd seen the movie before. But I assure you, this was my very first viewing of this movie.
And I'm going to be honest with you because, part of our camaraderie, I suppose, for us is that we mutually enjoy very strange, bizarre movies. We think of each other, like, if something comes out that's really weird, like, this is the person I'm going to go see it with. So I was very excited when I had talked about it as a subject to cover, that you were like, yeah, I saw that like once a really long time ago, and I'm like, okay, clearly you need to re-experience this. And
it was an experience.
Yeah. So the main subject, or not the main subject, the whiskey is just as important. The other topic, the pop culture topic, is Naked Lunch, or the movie Naked Lunch versus the book itself. So we had watched, I had rewatched, I've seen it many, many times, but I'd watched it with you, and that was a great joy for me. It was. There's certain movies that I enjoy watching with other people, just because I know that they're going to elicit a certain kind of very raw reaction, one way or another, be it really enjoying it or really like, what the fuck is going on? So, please do tell. Give me your insights into what you saw and your thoughts.
Okay, so it's almost as exciting to watch the person watching it as it is to watch the movie itself.
Absolutely.
There's a video game series that I like to do the same thing with. But anyways, so totally the layperson as far as this goes. Going into it, I had realized within the first 2 minutes of the movie that, yes, I definitely have not seen the whole thing. I just remembered the mugwump, and that's about it.
Yeah.
So, first viewing of the movie, I was like, what the fuck?
Yes.
And like Eric had mentioned, I like real weird shit. Eric likes really weird shit. We went and saw Neon Demon together because we were like, okay, this is the movie for us. It's going to be weird. We watched it. And I'd have friends ask me about it later. They're like, hey, did you see that movie? What did you think? I was like, I thought it was really great. Mm-hmm. Be like, so you're saying I should watch it? And I would be like, absolutely not. I do not know anyone other than you who would enjoy that movie. And you probably don't know anyone other than me who would enjoy that movie either.
And honestly, like, it's to hit on that movie specifically, there's not been a single person in my circle of life that I've sat down and watched that movie. Like, I own it, I bought it, I enjoy that filmmaker, and there's no one else I can think of in my circle of friends.
No, I wouldn't watch it with anyone else either.
Exactly. That was a great. So just to hit on that real quick. We went to, it must have been at least the opening week. I'm not sure. It wasn't the opening.
It was because it wasn't in the theater long.
So we went, there was 10 people in the theater, and I think there was 5 people left, including us, by the time the movie ended. Like, people got up and walked the fuck out.
Besides that, the only other movie I had seen people walk out of was Year One. And it was like a family went into it thinking it was a comedy.
Oh,
and then when the old dudes like rub hot oil on my body to Michael Cera for like the 3rd time, then the family got up and left.
Oh, that's amazing.
So going into this movie, I thought that this movie was really weird. I was talking to a friend at work about it today, and I was like, yeah, we're doing that for the podcast today. And he was like, what's the movie about? And I paused for a moment. I took a deep breath and sighed because I didn't really know how to explain what this movie was about to someone. So this is what I told him. Not quite verbatim, but this is close to what I said. This is how I describe Naked Lunch as a movie.
I am so excited for this.
So a guy, Peter Weller, whose name is Bill.
Yep, Bill.
Bill in the movie is like an exterminator, a bug exterminator.
Yep.
He and his wife are hooked on whatever sawdust powder it is he sprays for roaches.
Pyrethrum.
They use it as a drug, and they're hooked on it, and basically what happens from there is they get high on it. Some of Bill's friends have sex with his wife. He accidentally, quote unquote, I don't know if it was an accident or not, he accidentally shoots his wife in the head, and then leisurely trades his gun for a typewriter and moves to somewhere in North Africa, Morocco.
In the movie, it's Interzone.
I was getting to that. He moves there, but he's told it's a place called Interzone. When he's there, he walks around a lot. He attempts to type on his typewriter, which is a bug with a talking asshole.
Yes.
There's homosexuality is sprinkled in it somehow, mainly I think just for shock value for the time that the movie was made, but it's in there really for no reason at all. He gets led to believe he's some kind of secret agent, and in the end everyone ends up like sucking the head dicks of the mugwumps, these creatures that look like aliens that have jizz coming out of their heads. And that's how the movie ends. And I was saying, like, it felt really long. And not many movies I have been like, is it over yet? How long is this going to take? That movie could have ended at any point in time throughout its whole run. And it wouldn't have been any different. So it's like, to me, I don't know what the fuck the movie was about. It was really weird. I don't think that I would probably watch that movie again.
Wow, okay.
I think I'm a one and done.
I'm one and done with that. So that movie has a lot more. There's a lot going on with it, and we can't unpack all of it in this conversation. But there's a lot of deep metaphors going on with it, and so the film is different than the book. So
naturally, that's usually what happens.
So the main thing is, Naked Lunch, the movie, is inspired by, I would say, Naked Lunch, the book, the Beat book that came out in 1958 by William S. Burroughs, and it was banned. Straight up universally banned for being so horrifically grotesque that no one could, in civilized society, bear to even be around it. So I think David Cronenberg, so it's a David Cronenberg movie.
Written and directed by Cronenberg.
So one of the things he had said is, he had wanted to make a movie about it, but trying to tackle it, he couldn't do a literal adaptation. There was two main reasons. Number one, the scope. So the scope is you're alluded to that there's more things going on, a greater scale of what's happening. So in his estimate, in 1991, when they were doing the movie, it said it would have cost $400 or $500 million to make if it was a literal adaptation. And then he has this wonderful quote that I absolutely love. And he was basically saying something to the effect that if it was a literal adaptation, that no culture could withstand the movie. Because it is, I've read the book, and it is very shocking. And I'll tell you that with good reason, you couldn't do it. It's such a, number one, just the format. and number two, just the content of what the book is about. There's just no way. There's just no way it would ever be. Even today, with how weird everything is and how open we think society is, we still couldn't talk about these things because the things it talks about is absolutely mind-shattering to like the status quo. So we can get into. So is that your consensus? Your kind of your cliff notes of thoughts of the movie?
Yeah, I'm scratching the surface, but then again, I also want to say like I was really tired. I wanted the movie to be over sooner,
Right.
and I wasn't really looking. As my first real viewing of it, I wasn't deep diving for more meaning.
Well, let me ask you
things.
this: was it memorable?
Absolutely. I'll tell you that much.
Do you
Yes,
feel that after seeing that movie that there are moments in it that'll stick with you?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I think a hallmark of a good movie, and being whether or not you can initially understand it, is what impact does it have on you? And if it's a movie that sticks with you after a viewing the first day and into infinity, you know that movie did something right. You might not agree with the subject matter. You might not necessarily understand everything that's going on, but if it's a movie or anything, be it song or a piece of artwork or whatever it is, if it sticks with you, then it's done something right, correctly. It's provoked something out of you that you will never forget.
Definitely.
So Naked Lunch is one of those movies, and I love showing it to people, and most people come out exactly what you're talking about. But then my favorite thing to do, and what I'll do with you now, is make subtle references to that movie in everyday conversation around other people, and you and I will now have a private, dialogue.
We have our own little thing.
Our own little thing, because we've experienced this movie together, and I think it's one of those things that's important to watch. So I'm going to get into. So what I'll touch on is a broad overview of the book itself. We're not going to get into it's just, again, the book is a whole other thing. And then we're going to get into the movie itself. So William S. Burroughs wrote this book. So he went to Tangier, which is in Morocco, 1953, after a failed affair with Allen Ginsberg. So for people that don't know, William S. Burroughs is affiliated with the Beat poet generation. So Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg, himself, were the fathers, if you will, of what would become the Beat generation. So he ran off to Tangier, and one of his main ways of communicating with people is he would write letters and then do routine. So he'd write these little stories, and he would take them to extremes. So they'd just be these over the top, extreme little stories. So he was, over the course of 5 years, he was sending Allen Ginsberg these. It would be a personal letter saying, talking about like what's going on in his life, and then he would send routine, as they're called, and that's the shorthand between Ginsberg and Burroughs, and anyone that knows about Burroughs is that he would write routines. So he sent to them over the course of the 5 years, and they were strange little things. And one of the things that they did, one of the routines in the movie, which was the talking asshole routine, where this guy trained his asshole to talk, and eventually the asshole took control and sealed over his mouth and took control of the body. So, again, a little story taken to its extreme conclusion in the most grotesque way possible. And I have a very soft spot for really grotesque things.
That's almost like a Clive Barker-y thing.
And again, you're absolutely right. It ties into my personal admiration or enjoyment of really grotesque and weird shit. And I like authors personally that really push the boundaries. If I feel uncomfortable with it, like I know that I'm in a good place that I'm going to like it. Because I want to be challenged and I want to have that. I don't like being pacified when I read or I'm watching something. I mean, I do, but in a greater context, I like being challenged in that way. So when Burroughs was putting the book together, he saw it as a traditional book. He shopped it around to everyone. But because it was so obscene, because again, this is 1957, right around the time that he was trying to get it published. There's just no way. 1957, you're in the Eisenhower years. America they were not having it. So in 1957, he moved to Paris, France, and he met a publisher there that wanted to release it. So at the end of his Tangier expedition writing this book, he had 500 pages of notes. Some were finished, some were very rudimentary, as William Burroughs puts it. So he sat down with two other people to assemble this book. So he had finally got a publisher to agree to publish it, but the book wasn't quite ready. So as they would finish chapters, they would send them off to the printer, and they'd have them printed. And the book was sent back to them in an arbitrary fashion. And so the interesting thing about this book is that as it was being sent back, they didn't make any edits or any changes. So all the chapters were completely out of place, and they made one change. So there's a scene at the beginning of the book, and they moved it to the end. And that's it. So they were sent back all these pages arbitrarily, and they're like, that's it. That's exactly what we want. That's exactly the thing. So, what he said about it was that it was closer to the facts of human perception. So, as when you walk down the street, you perceive things kind of out of sequence. You notice someone's hat. You notice the reflection off a window. You notice a sound. And so he really liked that when the book came back, that it was more like how you would actually experience something in real life as opposed to a coherent story.
That's interesting because one of the notes that I have for the movie version is that, what did I write down? It was just like, timelines seem really skewed.
So, because my next thing, or one of the things I want to talk about is Cronenberg specifically was more concise with it. So, as far as the movie, so David Cronenberg wanted to adapt Naked Lunch and started the process in 1985. So he had actually went to Tangier, visited all the places that Burroughs had been, and he started to write the script quite a while. So 1985, Cronenberg wasn't quite popular. So he had done some cult hits, things of that nature, and he went off actually and was filming Nightbreed. So he was an actor. He was actually the villain. So from the first episodes, this kind of all ties back again. You're right. This ties back to a Clive Barker thing in more ways than one. And that's David Cronenberg was the main villain or the monster villain in Nightbreed. And so on his way back, he started to write Naked Lunch, the script. And so the big distinction that he had put was that he wanted to have narrative cohesiveness, that he wanted to fuse his sensibilities with Burroughs' sensibilities to create something totally new. So he talks about a story about... Yeah, they're really... we could dive into that a little bit, but Cronenberg has this fetish in all of his 80s, 70s, and 80s movies where he loves mutation. And it's unwilling mutation. So if you've seen Scanners, Videodrome, if you've seen Rabid, they're all about people going through changes or mutations, and they have no control over them whatsoever, and it's not good. They're not these beautiful superhumans at the end of it.
Oh no, it's
they're
quite grotesque.
It's grotesque. So his interpretation of the movie is, so he has a spin on how he's interpreting Naked Lunch. So he wanted to make a movie that worked on a human emotional level in contrast to the book. So the book does not deal with any sort of human aspect. There's no emotional level to it.
No emotion?
No emotion.
So this is a book written by me for me?
Yeah. I wouldn't go that far. Whew. Yeah, no.
Well, just going off the emotion thing, yeah.
So the basic premise was to move back from the book, and then to include the typewriter, and then to include the man writing the story. He also wanted to include the shooting death of his real-life wife, Joan. So it's not mentioned in the book at all. And so we'll kind of touch on that in a bit here as I talk about, what he was doing. So the movie deals with homosexuality, drug addiction, death, and not knowing who you are. So those are the main things. If you think that homosexuality, you don't really understand what it is. But one of the things that fascinated Cronenberg is the idea that homosexuality being forced upon you, and that you have no ability to change that course. Like, what if that change was forced on you and you were an unwilling participant? What would that look like?
It would look like Naked Lunch, the movie.
Exactly. So I think Cronenberg accomplishes his goals for the movie very well. So we'll talk about some of the themes. So Burroughs has a focus of intelligence of the disease, a question of intent. So Burroughs is mostly known for the Junkie Diaries and having done drugs and being in the throes of addiction and working through that, and like referring to like disease as having intelligence, like it has a purpose. So as far as what he says disease is a part of life, and he openly questions what came first, the intestine or the tapeworm. Right? So he has this fascination with death, with disease, with mutation, and that's the kinship I say between Cronenberg and Burroughs. And it again, the movie is what the combination of the two minds you would get. So as far as distinction goes, David Cronenberg says that when Burroughs describes something as being insect-like, it's in a negative connotation. He usually describes those things when they're insect-like to be soulless or inhuman, whereas Cronenberg has a really deep-seated fascination with insects. And obviously, watching Naked Lunch, you see
a lot of it.
Yeah, a lot of weird insects, right? So, and then some things on David Cronenberg and drugs. So, Cronenberg wanted to use drugs as a metaphor, as control, and for addiction. So, he knew that he wanted the drugs to be invented, that by inventing his own drugs, they had a metaphorical connection, so that he could also stay away from, what he was trying to stay away from was the social political issues with heroin addiction and drug addiction and drug culture in general, that he really wanted to stick to drugs as a storytelling device and a personal device to tell the story. So if you notice, all the hallucinations in the movie, he's always doing drugs first, and then he goes off the deep end. So I don't know if you picked that up or not.
The whole thing was off the deep end.
Well, yes. But when he saw really grotesque creatures, he had done drugs right beforehand. And then he also knew that he wanted the movie to be primarily about writing. So, and as far as the effects, he made things that were metaphorically created in the book by the writer and made them physically present in the movie, and that they would influence him and tell him what to do. The creatures, on one level, are himself telling himself what to do, and on the other, it's the creatures themselves turning into something new and taking you through an experience. So that's Cronenberg on the effects and why he, like the mugwumps were described in the book as being like kind of neutral creatures. They weren't what you saw in the movie. That's Cronenberg's interpretation of mugwumps. And one of my favorite parts, and every time like I was looking at you when this came up, so it's on the talking assholes. Cronenberg says the talking asshole is Burroughs himself. That in a sense it's a part of you that you don't want to listen to because it's too base, it's too primal, and its truth is too uncivilized to be listened to. He goes on to say something to the effect of like it's a mind-asshole schism. It's more Freudian, as it's the unconscious mind versus the conscious mind. It's more of a mind-mind split. As far as the, on the role of the writer, we'll tie back around to this. One of the things with the movie, what Cronenberg was doing was he posited, or it's in his opinion, or he implied, that the death of Joan, his wife in real life, caused the events to happen. And as a way to work through the grief and work through the shame of what he had done, that he became homosexual. So the movie is the use of drugs and grief to end up at the end of it being a homosexual man. Now the truth be told was that he was bisexual primarily in real life prior to that, but in his mind, or Cronenberg framed it, was that the cause of the end of this, or the process of grief, the process of dealing with accidentally killing your wife, it was that as a way to deal with that, he turns into a homosexual man, and he creates this whole, he's an agent, he goes to Interzone, and is going to infiltrate this drug company, basically, a rival company, and that Joan was a intergalactic centipede sent to infiltrate him, but they had set it up to where he was infiltrating her.
Yes.
It gets really convoluted.
Yes.
But if you think about how that story works, or how it's really effective, is like in reality we delude ourselves so much to justify any sort of thing. And one of the things that they mentioned in the documentary was that William S. Burroughs doesn't believe in accidents, that you're accountable for all of your actions. So one of the things that he has to deal with every single day, or he thinks about, is the shooting death of his wife for the rest of his life. And he didn't die young. He kicked all his drug habits, and he lived to be old as fuck. So he was living with the fact that he had killed his wife, and that even though they were drunk, and she had... So the difference with the movie versus real life was that she had said, it's time for our William Tell act, and then he was really drunk, missed, and shot her right between the eyes, where in the movie, he's the one that says that line. So that's kind of the main difference. But in real life, it was the other way around. And they had a kid together, which is not mentioned at all in the movie, obviously. It doesn't really work very well for, narrative purposes. So that's, Cronenberg is inferring by including Joan, including those human aspects. So those other characters that are in the movie represent Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac, and he basically implies that because he killed Joan, he runs off to Interzone, deals with the grief, being alone, not being connected to society, and uses the cover of being an agent to become homosexual. And it's essentially...
That's the best cover for an agent.
It's the best cover for an agent. And he's got to write a report.
I actually have in my notes here, going back to what you just said a little bit ago, that there are no accidents.
There are no accidents. And again, so that ties into, in the documentary that, William S. Burroughs doesn't believe that whether you consciously or unconsciously do it, there are no accidents. He did it, so he had to deal with the fact that he killed his wife. And so what's interesting in the movie is that he loops back around and meets Joan number 2, and kind of essentially relives that whole first part of the story over again. And then the final killing, and I'm not really necessarily sure what that's supposed to represent, but maybe it's the final letting go of the fact and coming to the realization that he's, number one, he is responsible for his actions, because when he killed her for the second time, he wasn't high or drunk. And that it's the step into his new life. So he's going into France. So it's the transition into the next phase of his life, which is releasing the book. Cronenberg takes the book. He takes the life of the book, and he uses it in his shorthand or his thematic things, which is unwilling transformation from one thing to the next, and being different or worse off at the end from the beginning to the end of that transformation, which is, at the end of it, I don't know that he's any better off than he was at the beginning of it.
I would say probably not.
Probably not. That is really where the homosexuality part comes in. Is that, in real life, he was bisexual, and then over the course. So as it goes in the documentary was that after he had killed his wife, he had never been with another woman ever again, that he was only with men from that point forward. As a Cronenberg takes it, or the interpretation of that particular era, as being the catalyst into homosexuality. And the book deals with unwilling homosexuality. Basically, like, what the fuck am I reading?
It's some real forward thinking.
It's some fucking crazy shit. So, as far as the book goes and the intent. So Cronenberg says, basically of the book, of the thought processes, and of in his general thought of beat poets, I guess, is he says that anything that disturbs the status quo is dangerous in a totalitarian society, and if you're a serious writer, questioning the status quo is what you do. So Burroughs deals with drug addiction, deals with very taboo sexuality, and he does it in a over-the-top, hyper-grotesque way. And then William Burroughs says something to the effect, or he says this specifically, but in regards to the reaction of Naked Lunch at the time, is all censorship is political and has to do with control. So he's introducing contrary thoughts and things that really haven't been explored, especially in a 50s era America or the world, and really challenges. And even now, it's challenging. You read that shit and you're like, holy fuck. So it's interesting. I chose this. I was really excited to do this show with you, to do this topic with you specifically. But it got me thinking about, like, what is my fascination with it? Because, like, at this point in my life, I use it as a relationship barometer. So what I do is if I have a new girlfriend, I will show her that movie. Because, like, one of the things I openly talk about is my obsession with weird movies, weird, things in general. And then whenever someone says, oh yeah, I love weird movies, I'm like, okay.
How much do you like weird movies?
How much?
Prove to me what you are really saying.
So I will say, have you seen Naked Lunch? And then usually 10 out of 10 times is, no, what is this movie that you're speaking of? And we watch it. And it's
the movie we're making.
So it's one of those things that, like, I'll watch this movie, and I'm watching the lady as much as I'm watching the movie, because at this point I could quote the damn movie for the most part. And
I don't know how you could do that the way that Peter Weller mumbles every line in that movie. Yeah. But anyways.
So going to that, I love his reactions in those movies. They're so funny to me, because, like, the whole scene where he's, like, rubbing the bug powder on the lips of the typewriter.
Which that's composition-wise, that particular scene, oh man, that's really spot on. Like, I had to take a picture of that scene not because it was a guy rubbing a bug's asshole with roach powder, but because it was a really well put together scene, composition-wise.
But my favorite thing is, like, he's like, yeah, okay, yeah. And that's kind of his whole, like, whenever these grotesque things happen, his reaction is very subdued, and he's kind of like, yeah, I'll guess I'll do that. That's cool. Like,
I think that Peter Weller could have been the third character in the first season of True Detective because of just, like, how low and mumbly his voice was throughout the entire movie, which would have fit right in.
Speaking really low and mumbly.
With
Let's get lower.
Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson in True Detective.
I speak with a lower voice than you. Is it lower yet? Yeah, absolutely. And I love the first season of True Detective. It's great.
Everyone does.
As you should. So I really had to, like, examine my motivations as to, number one, why do I like that movie? Why do I force this on other people? And it's better than what I used to do, because I used to have what I call the holy trifecta relationship test movie marathon, which I would do Apocalypse Now, Jacob's Ladder, and Requiem for a Dream all in one sitting.
Why would you do this to people? Like, I get that you want to be like, is this the one? Can they handle this? But that's a bit much.
I don't do it anymore. I stopped that. I stopped it because I realized that it was, like, a little sadistic to do, and, like, at the end of it, like, I realized, like, oh yeah, this is why I'm single, because I'm a terrible person, and I force, like, unassuming, unaware people of these really heavy, terrible movies, and basically psychologically torture them for 6 hours.
Yeah, that's like something that you'd be like, hey, we're 6 months into our relationship. Will you watch one of these movies with me? You might / probably not like.
Yeah.
But hey, watch it with me.
Yeah, watch it.
Like, I just met you. This is our second date. Get ready to see some shit.
We're gonna experience some shit together. It's like going off to war mutually, but, like, me being the person that's already gone back and forth to war a bunch of times, and, like, it has no effect on me. So, like, I'm able to watch them.
I also get this too because, like, once upon a time I knew a guy who was very intense, and if, like, I maybe wasn't super into a girl, I'd be like, hey, you want to come out with me and one of my friends? And I would subject them to this guy just to see how they would react.
Oh, that's amazing.
And if they stuck around, it's like, hey, all right.
All right. Hey, you can handle that. We're good. So the intent, I think, was pure. The execution of my test was terrible. And I don't do it anymore.
The intent was pure.
Yeah. The intent was pure. Like, I wanted to see the compatibility with me and my own mindset, my tastes. Because I have, like, I don't expect everyone to have my tastes, but if you could sit through certain movies and not, like, want to have them shut off or be horrified at the end of it, then we're good. We're probably in a good place. This relationship can work. But again, I'm still single. So that might speak volumes upon itself. So one of the things is, like, with that is, like, how far what they intended the movie to be, because obviously, like, we went into, I rewatched the making of documentary, rewatched the movie fresh with you, and went into the filmmaker's perspective of what he was trying to accomplish versus what I use it for. And I think there's a common thing with pop culture and movies is, like, once you release something into the world, you have no control over how it's used or what it becomes, and your intent for something could very quickly be overshadowed by just how society co-opts it into whatever they want to do. And for me, I've co-opted that movie into a weird, like, dating ritual. And So I had to think about, like, well, number one, why am I doing that? Where did that come from? How did that start? And why do I continue to use that movie as like a benchmark for compatibility in my relationships? Because
it's pretty heavy.
It's a heavy movie. Like, it doesn't end well. Like, it doesn't end as bad as Requiem for a Dream, but it doesn't end well. It's like 7. Like, it ends on a kind of a sad note.
It could have ended at any part in the movie.
Yes. So, number one, my fascination comes with, like, I've always liked Cronenberg movies. So I have this fascination with uncontrolled metamorphosis into something new. And I think when I saw Naked Lunch, I may have been 13 or something along those lines. And
would you even know what you were looking at that point?
But here's what I saw, though. There's certain questions. So I've seen a lot of Cronenberg's movies up to that point. So I'd seen Rabid and Scanners and Videodrome and The Fly. Most famously, The Fly. Jeff Goldblum.
That movie scared the shit out of me when I was a little kid.
Absolutely. So those movies really scared me. They spoke to me. And so when I saw Naked Lunch, I was right in puberty. And you have, like, for myself, like, I have all these questions about puberty. You don't know. Like, you hear about this thing, you fucking go to sex ed, and you're like, you're going to go through all these horrifying changes, and you're going to do all these things, and everything about you is going to change. And Naked Lunch kind of hits those personal changes. And, also, dealing with sexuality. Like, where I'm from growing up, implying that someone is homosexual was the worst insult you could possibly give. Like, it was a damning thing to say. Like, that was the final, like, worst if it was implied that you're homosexual. And so seeing that movie, and maybe it prompted me to think about it, but I'm like, well, what if I'm gay? What does that mean? What is that going to look like? And so that movie, like, tied it, like, it just hit me in such a basic psychological way. Like, I was about to hit my own changes, physical changes, and it was dealing with homosexuality, and I was able to understand what that was. And then you having to sit with yourself and be like, what does that mean? What does that mean if I'm gay? What does it mean if, am I going to turn into a fucking mugwump? Am I going to, what is going on? So it hit me right at that exact age where the themes, I didn't understand all of the deeper themes of drug addiction and those sorts of things. It didn't speak to me. But I could understand that this was a person that was in pain, that had done something that they were trying to run away from, and that they were in the process of changing that they had no control over. And that really spoke to me for whatever...
Boy, you just really summed it up right there.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, exactly.
It's like all those aspects... You can break it down like that, but the movie definitely showed it
exactly
in a non-conventional way.
And that's what I love about the movie is that, as I said, as far as the video effects, is that he is showing metaphorical things in a physical way on the screen. So all of those the monsters, the talking asshole, the bug, all of that stuff are aspects of that person's mind and how they're coping with, because he's on drugs, clearly, through the whole thing. So he's hallucinating, he's in the depths of despair, and he's going through these changes and creating this whole world, and he's writing these reports, which in the movie would be the book Naked Lunch. But in the movie, we're seeing the writing process of that book.
So as I watch the movie, I am definitely guilty of taking things at face value and not looking into the meaning of things. Because here I am watching a movie, and here's a guy who's just mumbling and doing weird shit, and there's all this other weird shit happening. But I am not thinking of the deeper meaning of any of it.
And here's the thing. It's like what I like about Naked Lunch at the end of the day is that it works on a lot of different levels. When you first see it, it hits you on a very basic level where you're like, what the fuck did I just see?
Which is definitely my reaction.
So we talked about some of the meanings, some of the things that it goes into, and then you can come back to it and rewatch it, and you start to peel back the layers of that movie. And again, every time I see it, I pick up on some other little thing in it, some other level of despair or transformation or whatever it is, where I'm like, okay, I see another thing. And that's what is so brilliant about it. And as you're saying, the composition of the shots, how they're blocked out, how they're filmed, like, it's so good. It looks great. The soundtrack is... Interesting fact. So the soundtrack is done by Howard Shore, and it's the same guy that did Silence of the Lambs. So now every time I see Naked Lunch, I think Silence of the Lambs was jazz. Right.
It was definitely, there was some times in that movie where the jazz got a little out of hand, in my opinion.
Yeah, it went, but it all adds to the ambiance and time frame of that particular...
Like, here's a sad guy mumbling, let's go so avant-garde in the jazz
like
that it's out of control.
Way the fuck out there. Yeah, it's amazing. With Cronenberg, he had a very specific lens that he wanted to explore the story. And again, you couldn't do that movie in a literal way. You couldn't even do it. You really couldn't even explore any of it. Even if you explored like one aspect of that movie, it would be immediately censored across the world. It is. You could not physically do the book in any sort of way. So I think it was a good move to have it more about the writer, about the process of writing that movie, about the effects of drugs and everything else on him. And I think as far as effects go, yeah, I mean, they're of a time, I suppose, but they're really effective.
But they're still practical effects, which will always be better than CG effects, no matter what. Every
day, forever. And I think, like, the mugwump, that's a fucking amazing effect. Like,
yeah, in the documentary, just seeing how they made all the parts of the mugwump move, how could you even come up with something like that? There was really intricate hand controls.
Yep.
Which did the whole thing.
Yeah, and it's with the typewriters too. So if you have a 20-second scene, there's 13 different puppets to make that scene work for the different camera angles and the various things that it does. And they are functional characters. Like, I wasn't drawn out of the movie because of the effects. I really felt more drawn in ultimately to those effects because you really saw, like,
there is some sort of gravitational effect to, say, the typewriter bug butthole
the bug butthole thing
character.
And I want and maybe it's just the perverse nature of myself, but I want everyone to experience the talking bug butthole typewriter.
My question is on that. As I was watching it, one of the notes that I wrote down is, why is it that this bug butthole thing, the butthole talks, but yet the bug is also talking too? So it's coming out of both ends, really.
You know what? I had never thought of that fact before, because the mandibles move.
Yeah.
The mandibles move.
It's talking from its quote-unquote mouth, but its butthole is also talking too.
That's a really good point, and I have never explored that or thought about that, because just a hairy, puckering, slimy asshole talking is enough to distract me from anything else.
Okay, that's weird that's the first thing that I thought about, but yet the last thing that you thought about in that movie.
I've never even... It just... To me, it was like part of the mannerisms of this fucking creature. Like, it just... Because it's so farcical just by itself. A typewriter that is a beetle and has an asshole on its back that talks and is hairy. Like, just all of those combined, like, I just didn't even question that the mandibles were going back and forth, and it was also talking from its front mouth.
I would like to know the creative process that, ended with that being created.
So in the making of documentary, they gave a bunch of sketches, and so like with some of the sketches, the typewriter apparatus was on its side, and I think just for the practical effects of actually building this thing, and then how the real life people have to interact with it, that's how it came to be. Because it's like, it has to be a typewriter still. It has to resemble some sort of writing device.
But there has to be a butthole somewhere.
A butthole somewhere. And which is a tie-in to the book, and a tie-in, again, to the talking asshole bit that they do in the movie. And I love that. Just something about it that I find so amusing. And when I watch this movie, one of the things is like, it's gone, my interpretation or my appreciation or however you want to say it, has gone so far left field from, number one, the intent of the movie, and number two, what originally affected me. Like, I see it now, and it's almost like a comedy. Like, I'm not really affected by it. Like, I just think it's like Silence of the Lambs. Silence of the Lambs, I'm going to go into this. So, and I don't know if anyone knows this, but Silence of the Lambs is the greatest romantic comedy ever made.
Explain this, please.
So, I would love to do an episode on this, and I'm not. And I would actually have a guest on with this, because I've met someone in my life that is as passionate about Silence of the Lambs as I am. Like, it's crazy. So you see the movie so many times, and you become desensitized to, like, the horrifying aspects of it, the shock value. So Silence of the Lambs coming out and dealing with a serial killer, dealing with a vulnerable woman, dealing with these very horrifying things. So Silence of the Lambs is one of those movies that's from a female perspective. So the main protagonist is a small stature female person who is young, who is naive, and is forced into this really grotesque world and meets this guy, this man that is very dangerous and has to navigate the one person that she can glean insight from to stop another monster. So she's stuck between two monsters and trying to navigate her own world. So that alone, like, that's its own thing. And then you have some of the grotesque things, the whole little dance routine.
Yes.
But once you've seen the movie so many times, I would say around, like, maybe the 20th time you've seen the movie, those aspects go away, and you forget them. And then you start to think...
It becomes a whole different movie.
It becomes a whole different movie. And it becomes like, wow, this Hannibal Lecter guy, he's really romantic. He's trying to help this lady out in her career, and he's doing all these romantic overtures. And, like, Buffalo Bill becomes the comedic element of the movie, and not the horrifying...
I don't know if there's any point in the movie where you could really take him seriously.
Yeah. Well, like, he's so shocking, and so... Because I do remember, like, watching that movie and being totally disturbed by his behavior, and being shocked... Like, because when the movie came out, it really was something different. Because just the way that no one had really put a female character in that kind of context before and have her be the hero. Like, Sigourney Weaver, as far as like a female protagonist goes, is completely different than Clarice Starling. Because in a lot of ways, like, Sigourney Weaver's character was authoritative, in charge, knew what she was doing, and then survived this horrifying experience. Where Clarice was naive, she was young, she was not physically as strong as even her peers, and she comes out being the heroine at the end of it. And I think that perspective when the movie came out was really fresh and new, and just the way that the movie was shot was very, like, it was very sensual, it's very soft, and people don't... it has a contradictory, like the subject matter versus the actual, like what you saw on screen were kind of contradictory to each other because it was a very sensual movie, but it dealt with like serial killers. Like think about it, seriously though, think about it. It's a very romantic movie. It really, how it's shot, it's very soft, right? Just the cinematography itself is, and the pacing of the movie and kind of how they're blocked off. Like, if you took out the content of what Hannibal Lecter and Clears are saying and then replace it with like generic romantic comedy dialogue, it would work.
Why aren't we doing this for another show?
We will do it. We can do it.
We're talking too much about it then.
That's fine. No. I want to give people a hint, and maybe I'll just cut it off at the statement of Silence of the Lambs is the greatest romantic comedy of all ever. But that's how I truly feel, and I love. So,
actually, you know what? There's a movie that I can't remember his name now. It's not because I'm drunk. We took it easy for this show. Elijah Wood.
Yep.
Was in a movie. Like...
Maniac?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like, that turns into a rom-com, like, sort of.
Do you
with throwbacks to Silence of the Lambs with Goodbye Horses. And, yeah.
I love that song. I absolutely love that song. It's so iconic.
It is.
And
is it because of the movie or is it because it's a good song? I don't know.
I feel that I would like that song regardless of the movie. Like, that's kind of right up my alley.
I feel the same way. Yeah.
Like, if I heard that in a club, I'd be like, ooh, what is this? This is what I like in life.
Time to tuck and roll.
Tuck and run.
Put it right in there and yeah.
So one of the things that I like to do is I have some Silence of the Lambs gifts. And what I'll do, like at work, is if we're in a presentation and someone's talking or they're about to talk, I'll send them like a Buffalo Bill GIF.
Or GIF.
Or GIF.
I don't like that one. I like GIF. That's what I know.
GIF. Anyways, so I will send a GIF or GIF or whatever your preference is to someone who's about to have to be very serious or is like having a very serious face. And then, like, my favorite one is there's a GIF where Hannibal Lecter is looking through papers and like he licks his finger and then winks. And like I'll send that as a thing to someone while they're trying to be serious. I'm a rotten person. I mean, I'll say that much.
There's worse things that you could do.
No, there is worse things to do. But I think it's very telling of my personality, the torment that I like to put people through. Oh, yeah. See, you got Kitty there.
I got the cat.
Got the cat. All right. So, let's see. We've gone through video effects. That's good.
If we could, I'd just like to talk about some of my observations in the movie.
Please, give me Kyle's observations of the movie. I'm really curious, as being a first-time viewer of that movie, what your insights are, because I've been watching this movie on and off for 20 years, so please.
So, like, when I look at something, I, maybe look at it in a different light than someone else, but, I'm watching it and just thinking about Peter Weller's performance. It just seemed like he was more of RoboCop in this movie than he actually was in the movie RoboCop. Or RoboCop 2.
Oh.
Either way, like, he was more robotic in his performance than anything else. And while most things, whether it be sound effects, music in the movie, or other characters talking, were at a normal audible level whenever it came to Peter Weller's talking parts. I mean, the mumbling would just be so low. So low that it would be... Okay. I almost felt like I wanted to turn the subtitles on for the movie. I mean, really, I would have cranked it, but we were watching it late at my place, an apartment building, and that's not really something you want to do. But it was very hard to hear, especially at the beginning of the movie. It was very hard to hear some of his lines. Okay, so, I mean, in the movie, he's warned about Interzone.
Mm-hmm.
Like right away he's like, this is a place, it's like the Wild West, some bad shit's going on in Interzone. What happens? He goes straight to Interzone. Like, I'm being warned about this place, I shouldn't go there? Well, better go right there.
Better go
like,
straight to that place.
He turned into a teenager and was like, I am going to do exactly what I am told not to do.
You know what's interesting is that I don't remember that. I don't remember him being warned about Interzone as much as he's just told to go to Interzone. Like, your mission...
And that too, yeah. It's like, don't go there. It's a bad place. And then, like, this is where you need to be. We're here.
So what's interesting... So, like, one of the things with... I suppose speaking to that is that... so, Interzone, in reality, is Tangier, which is in Morocco. And... he and I don't exactly know if, like, I know that he was on the lam. In real life, he was on the lam. He was wanted for manslaughter. And he actually was charged and convicted of manslaughter. But he initially ran off because I believe Morocco doesn't have extradition. Is the reason, one of the reasonings that he went there.
That would make sense then.
And so in the book Naked Lunch, Tangier becomes Interzone. And what was so interesting is that how it's presented in the movie is very like wonderfully ethnic and very interesting. But like in the movie and in the book, everything is described in like a very cold, like corporate way. Like Interzone and Annexia is the thing I was trying to describe. So Annexia is France.
Yes. The other part.
Although it's confusing at the end of the movie. So at the end of the movie, he goes to Annexia. They're wearing like comrade and speaking like in Russian accents, which are the detectives from the beginning of the movie, if you didn't notice.
I don't know if I did.
Yeah, so they're the same detectives that originally arrested him for the bug powder incident. They appear as like comrade soldiers for Annexia, but Annexia is France. And they're driving that sweet tank vehicle thing.
Yes, like the border patrol agent.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. They were speaking in a Russian inflection, but it was like...
terrible.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
But they're supposed to be French, so I don't really understand that per se. Yeah. But that's some good insight that I didn't pick up, I guess, is that it's terrible. Don't go there. I'm going to go directly to that place that is terrible.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And then, like I had mentioned earlier, one of the characters in the movie is played by Bilbo Baggins.
Yes.
I can't think of his name right now, but he did have the good line about, there are no accidents. He is the one who says that line in the movie.
Yep.
And then, as far as one-liners go, I'm a big fan of one-liners. You'll hear me making a lot of them in these podcasts. But my favorite one was at the end of the movie. Peter Weller's character says that the zone takes care of its own.
The zone takes care of its own.
Which is like some of the shit that I say in my day-to-day life. Like, I say some things like, do what you want to do, don't do what you want to do. Or, like, if you're aware of it, take care of it. That kind of thing. The zone takes care of its own is right up that alley. So I really appreciated that, too.
So do you feel that you'll use that in your everyday life now?
I don't know. Well...
And Bilbo Baggins is played by Ian Holm.
Yeah, okay, that's what it is.
And then Julian Sands plays Yves Cloquet. And then Roy Scheider plays Dr. Benway, the guy from Jaws.
Yes.
So there's a lot of really famous actors in this movie.
How old is Bilbo Baggins? Dude, that guy he looked old in that movie.
The thing is like, he's looked old since 1981.
He's looked old. He's old.
Since Alien. Old. Since Alien, he's looked old. Because he was the android in Alien. So he was born in 1931.
Wow.
Yeah, he old fuck.
He old.
What's your other observations?
Let's talk about what I wrote in my notes here, the Dick Monster typewriter hump machine.
Oh my God, that's just a pure joy. It's a pure joy.
Because, speaking of what you were saying earlier with mutations, grotesque mutations, like this thing, it really goes. We're going from one thing to another thing to another thing. So it starts out as a typewriter, an Arabic typewriter.
The Mujahideen.
The Muad'Dib.
The Muad'Dib. Paul Muad'Dib.
So it starts out as a typewriter, and when the fingers really get flying on it, it turns into like some sort of sexual open gaping wound which hands go deep into.
Yes.
And from there, then on the backside of the typewriter, some sort of hole opens up from which a dick type thing
yes.
snakes its way out of. And then the thing just folds out into this weird sea scorpion flying humping machine that joins what makes an orgy almost on the floor.
So there's a very specific purpose to that. So again, David Cronenberg is trying to avoid an X rating. So he has to sometimes metaphorically represent physical actions. Sometimes he's physically representing metaphorical things. So he's talking about sex, like they're having sex, but he's not going to depict actual sex. He's going to depict it through a visual metaphor. And so that typewriter is the visual metaphor of intercourse. So
I think that if you were trying to avoid an X rating, just having people bang probably would have been a better option than having this thing.
Yeah, because that thing is like, it has like pulsating breasts. It has a vagina that ejaculates a penis. And then it's got a bunch of like dirty danglers at the end of it.
It's like an oversized face hugger is really what it is, almost.
But like nothing malicious, just all like sexual and drippy.
Right, yes.
there's lots of KY jelly used in this movie because there's lots of moisture. Slippery when wet. Yes. So and that's another thing that I really think is really cool about the movie that sticks with you is just where he chooses to be literal or metaphorical or how he chooses to represent certain actions. It fucks, like seeing that fucking creature or seeing the typewriter butthole things, like
you will always remember it.
You will always
never forget it.
You will never.
Where were you when you saw the dick typewriter humping machine?
You will very clearly remember. And I think, and maybe that goes to like part of like why I want to share that movie with people, because it is so, like at first, yeah, you're like, what the hell did I just see? But then like when you're able to step back and objectively discuss what you're looking at and what you've experienced, like it's very vivid imagery and unforgettable things, and like it's not like stepping back from it today, you're not like, what the fuck, like we could talk about it, and it's like that's a very inventive use of film and video effects
It actually, you know what? It makes me not feel so bad about myself because sometimes I feel like I have zero creativity unless it comes to really perverted, saying really perverted shit. But there is no way that I could ever think of something so perverted and fucked up and weird as that.
Yes.
So that there's that.
And I think that it's such a great. So Naked Lunch the movie does such a great job of creating extremely grotesque, memorable imagery in the same way that the book itself is memorable, but does it in a way that really has to walk a fine line to not be basically censored or banned. And so you think about that effect. This movie came out, it wasn't banned, and it showed all of this very implied sexual things. Because, like, that penis, like, when that penis thing came out of the vagina and it was, like, it veiny, because you recognize that, like, it was a veiny dick coming out that vagina, right?
Yes.
It was.
Yeah.
The movie
I mean,
wasn't,
what other kind would there be?
well, yeah, but it's so over the top. But it wasn't banned. Like, it's not considered pornography, and that's an incredible thing to be able to achieve in a movie that's creative, that's being provocative, and it doesn't end up being in the pornography aspect of the spectrum. And again, I think you're going to remember that movie. It's going to stick with you. The mugwumps and the jism that comes out of their penises,
which come out of their heads.
And and then it's like the jism is a drug itself that is addictive, and it's the new drug. Like, you think about, like, just all the multiple layers of what's going on or what's implied. It's like you still, like, you're always questioning what the hell what did I just see?
Another thing was the large aquatic centipede.
Yes.
That one of the drugs in the movie, perhaps the book, I don't know, was made out of. Lots of centipede stuff going on.
Mm-hmm.
His wife was a space centipede.
Two factors with that. So you have William S. Burroughs' negative connotation of insects being soulless and a bad thing, and then you have Cronenberg's fascination and love of bugs. So, like the fly, obviously, so it's a mix of the two worlds. So I think that the drug, the black powder, is supposed to represent methadone, I believe. The initial drug, pyrethrum, is supposed to be heroin. And then I think mugwumpjism, I'm not sure, might be hash. I'm not exactly sure if those are the direct correlations because, again, David Cronenberg used those. He punched up the drugs to represent other things for the narrative, in purposes, basically. So there weren't exactly a tit-for-tat representation of an actual drug. But vaguely touching on it. So, like, at the end of the movie, Dr. Benway is revealed to be the housekeeper for the Frost couple, or Joan and Bilbo Baggins, and talking about how mugwumpjism is the wave of the future because there's much less political setbacks that go with it. But then it's like this instantly, like, addictive drug, and how he applies it. So he gets it's either mugwumpjism or the giant aquatic centipede thing. Like, he's taking the drug and just applying it directly to his skin and holding it there.
Yeah, he does that with the centipede powder. Bill does that in the movie on his neck. Not to an open wound or anything like that. Kind of in an area where there's a bruise, but just holds it there. Interesting.
And that's the thing, is like, and that's what I love about it, because it's open to interpretation. It tells a story, and I think it's more important that the story elicits a reaction out of you more than the literal thing that it's doing. So it's provoking a reaction out of you, but it's you can't rely on the literal representation of what's happening as what it actually means. And I really love movies like that don't, again, like Neon Demon. There's not a whole lot of dialogue in that movie. There's not a whole lot of, you kind of have to infer what's actually happening with that movie. It doesn't hold your hand. And I like movies like that are a little more challenging to traditional viewers.
And that's also, I would regard that as two movies in one as well.
Neon Demon?
Yeah.
Yes, most definitely. What are your other notes?
The last thing I just wanted to touch on was one of my notes here. I don't even remember writing this either. It's probably my favorite thing that I have.
Oh,
and it touches real close to home, too. And I wrote down human. And all human interaction is awkward.
Yes.
And it is. That's totally true. No matter what year it is, no matter what the situation.
Yep.
All human interaction is awkward.
Some truths transcend every generation. And I think you're right on that. So one of the things that they talk about with Cronenberg's intention of the film and trying to convey is that Bill is lonely in this movie. He's out of place. He's literally in another world, and he's in the grips of drug addiction, mourning the death of his wife, the implication that he did it, and he can't connect with anyone. And if you quick noticed some of the reports that he's writing, so he has two typewriters. He has the Martinelli and he has the Clark Nova, and he has two different sentences on both typewriters. And so one is,
I don't remember were they addressed to different people too?
Yeah, one was addressed to the Allen Ginsberg and one was addressed to Jack Kerouac.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah.
And one of the things is, I'm so lonely I can't connect with anybody. So it really delves into, if you see him in the movie, and part of the reason why Peter Weller's performance is the way it is because it's almost like he's two people in that movie, but you never see the other person represented. It's always talked about. They went to a party and he did quite the scene. He did X, Y, Z, but he doesn't recall it.
We never saw it,
and we never
heard about it until afterwards.
Or his friends come to visit him, and they're saying, "Hey, this book is amazing," and he's like, "I'm not writing a book."
Yeah, at no part in the movie had we seen him write any part of what would be this book.
Right. He goes, so he's completely separated from his actions. He's clearly in his own pit of despair, and that's really what the movie shows. This man at one of the lowest points of his life, and just totally out of his gourd high, and full of grief, and hallucinating these struggles that he's having. So really what we're seeing through the whole movie is a man hallucinating his struggles on the screen for us to see. And that's where Cronenberg is so effective in his filmmaking, is that we experience all those same feelings that he has. We get to experience them. We get to experience the what the fuck. Because you touched on the homosexuality piece, what the fuck? What? It's in there, but it's also we experience that as he does, which he's like, what? He shows up at a gay bar, which it's not specifically said as a gay bar. It's addressed as a dive bar, but he's clearly in a 50s era gay bar, waterfront dive. And he has no idea how he got there. But if in the movie, there are no accidents.
There are no accidents.
There are no accidents. So clearly, the first time he meets the mugwump,
this was no accident.
It was no accident. He ended up there. That it's part of the transformation that may have begun before, certainly went in earnest. So it's a deep movie, and you keep looking at the scenes, and you could really start to piece together all these, the various things as they it's great. What else you got?
That's about it. The only other thing I suppose I could talk about is with all the shocking imagery and everything on that, we might not have touched on what other people may have thought was the most shocking, and that's when Kiki and the other character, Cloquet, were in the giant bird cage, kind of melded as one creature, one absorbing the other in some sort of sexual dance, I guess. I don't know.
So the best way I think I could describe it is that clearly it's depicting unwanted sex. Basically, Cloquet is attracted to young interzone boys, as was described in the earlier part of the movie, and Bill wants something. He wants a contact with Benway. So he brings Kiki with him, knowing that Cloquet likes interzone boys and likes Kiki specifically. So as the setup is, Cloquet wants to show him his bird cage, and Bill has to go, hey, go see his fucking birds. And then Bill gets up to investigate, I suppose, to try and find the connections to Benway or whatever the situation is. And he walks into it. And what he walks into, which in reality, or the reality is that it would be gay sex, he walks into Cloquet morphed into a giant centipede.
I was just going to say something about it being a centipede. So thank
you. So he morphs into a giant centipede, and he's like literally penetrating all of his body with all of his little tendril things, and like stretching his, like, it's some Hellraiser shit actually. Like he's like being sort of ripped apart, and so it's a physical representation of a metaphor of a actual physical act. It's crazy, and that's the only way that you could skirt around depicting gay sex or any of these taboo subjects that they address in the movie, is by taking something to a completely different extreme where you're like, what the fuck am I seeing?
Yeah.
No, that's good. That's a good thing to bring up. I completely forgot about addressing that. All right. Well, if you don't have anything.
Yeah, that's about it for me.
All right. Well, you've been listening to another episode of Two Poor Bastards. This is Eric.
This is Kyle.
We'll see you next time.